Okay, so now that we have determined which of the angles are corresponding and sides are corresponding in those two triangles, let's talk about the following question. What is a congruency statement? It is a statement that matches the corresponding angles and sides of two congruent polygons. In our case, we're going to be focusing mostly on triangles, but it could be any polygon, which is a shape with sides. So go ahead and write that down, pause the video, and come on back. All right, so we have a statement called the congruency statement, and we can, just by having the statement, know how to determine which of the sides or which of the angles of our triangles are congruent, or corresponding rather. So in our triangle above, let me just get this rolled back up. We have the angles corresponding as such, we have the sides corresponding as such, and we're just going to go in the same order as the three letters provided to us to create our congruency statement. It says for the above triangles, triangle EFG is congruent to triangle, and I'm just going to go with the fact that E is the first letter here, E and X are congruent, so X will be the first letter in my statement. F is the second letter, and it's corresponding to W, so that'll be the second letter. And finally, G and Y are corresponding angles. So this is how I'm going to write this congruency statement. We have, similar to above, just to kind of keep this in perspective, if the only thing provided to me was that statement, and someone said, all right, what angles are corresponding? This is the way you want to keep it in check. Well, we know already that E is congruent to angle X. However, let's just write this down. Put first letter in parentheses next to that, because I want to make sure you all realize that anytime you're given any statement where there's two triangles showing congruency, the letters matter. E and X are corresponding, and so they are going to be congruent. The second letter matters. Again, F and W are the congruent angles. Angle F is congruent to angle W because they are the second letter, and also we proved that above based on the information provided to us. Finally, our third letter, G and Y, angle G, it will be congruent to angle Y because those are the third letter in our congruency statement. For the sides, just as above, we have EF is congruent to XW, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to underline EF and underline XW, and you can see we're going in order. The first two letters in the first triangle and the first two letters in the second triangle are creating sides, right? Segments require two letters. Those would be congruent and they would be corresponding. Just by having this statement, we can determine that. In addition, we know that FG and WY will also be corresponding sides. And to kind of show that, we've got the last two letters. I don't mean to cover up that side. The last two letters in both of our triangles. Okay, so the first two letters go together, the last two letters go together. And then finally, we have the first and the last letter, EG, and then the first and the last letter, XY, in the second triangle. That will always go together to show you which of the corresponding sides, or what are the corresponding sides in two triangles. All right, so now that we have all that taken care of, make sure you have all that written down, and once you do, go ahead and flip to the back of the page. And you'll see an example. It states, list the sides and angles that are congruent to each other given that triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF. Draw the triangles and then mark which sides and angles are congruent. So I'm going to do the first set of angles, and then I want you guys to complete these after I walk through a couple of different examples on this. Let's take a look at our congruency statement. We have triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF. So we're going to match up the angles, or the letters, based on where they're located in our statement. We have A and D in the first position, so we're going to know that angle A is congruent to angle D. And then we know the others based on the other positions. So I'll let you guys finish that up in a second. We've got sides associated with our triangle. And we've got, again, the first two letters match up, the last two letters match up, and then the first and the third and the first and the third match up. So one of the set of corresponding sides would be, let's see here, A and C and D and F, because those are the first and the third letters. So I would say that AC is congruent to side DF. Alright, so pause the video and go ahead and name the rest of the angles that are corresponding and are congruent, as well as the sides that are corresponding. Okay, and you should have drawing our triangles. Let's go ahead and draw those in this space. It's not very pretty, but that's a triangle. And that's a triangle. And let's name it. The first triangle we know is ABC. The second triangle we know is DEF. And the question also states to mark which sides and angles are congruent. So I'm going to stick with blue for my angles. And again, when we're marking sides or marking angles, and we have multiple angles congruent in different triangles, we've got to show that by multiple marks. So we've got angle A congruent to angle D, so I'll show one mark in each of those angles. We've got angle B congruent to angle E, so when I'm showing that, I'm going to show 2 marks in B and 2 marks in E. And then for C and F, I'm going to show 3 marks in C and 3 marks in F. So that way I know that C and F are congruent, A and D are congruent, and B and E are congruent. I'm going back to red for my sides. And we'll start with our first two we have here, AC congruent to DF. So here's AC, and here's DF. And we show that with just 1 mark to show just those two are congruent to each other. We have BC congruent to EF. There's BC, EF, and finally AB and DE. So the markings are important. They let us know what's congruent, and then at that point, based on that information, we can actually write our own congruency statement, which is what we're going to do next. Okay, so now that we have marked our sides and angles based on congruency, how can we write our own congruency statement from a picture? So we're going to write 3 congruency statements based on these 2 triangles, and they will all be correct, but we have to follow the path based on the letters that are in the order they give us. And what I mean by that is, for the first one we have triangle BCA, and here's BCA. We've got to follow the same path of the markings on this other triangle to come up with the way the letters are going to roll. So B in this case is a right angle, and then C is 2 marks, and A is 1 mark. We need to follow that same path. So the right angle on this guy is N. The 2 marks on this guy is P. And again, A had 1 mark, and this triangle M has 1 mark. For our next statement, again, these are all true. It's just walking in a different order. We go from 2 marks for C to the right angle for B, and then 1 mark for A. So I need to start with 2 marks on this triangle. That gives me P. I go to the right angle, N, and then I finish up with M, which is 1 mark. On this last example, we have A to B to C. So we're going from 1 mark to a right angle to C. And so here we're going 1 mark, which is M, to the right angle, which is N on that triangle, and then we go to P. Now the same process or the same path would work if we just had sides marked. Because for B to C to A, okay, I'm going from B, I'm crossing 1 mark, go to C, and then I cross 3 marks. For this other triangle, if I start with N and go to P, I cross 1 mark, and then from P to M statement. Okay, now you see a U-try, and we have ourselves a couple of triangles. And guys, I know it looks a little busy, but what you want to do is you want to focus in on each of the triangles separately. One of the most important things to do here is the fact that this side, SP, is what we call a shared side in geometry. You can see we have one mark here on SK and one mark on TP. We know those sides are congruent. We've got two marks on KP and 2 marks on ST, so those sides are congruent. In addition, let's put 3 marks in the middle. Okay, it's important to mark your shared side because you know that that both of those triangles are sharing side SP. When I say both of those triangles, focusing on the one they started with, which was triangle STP, we have triangle ST. Actually, let me highlight this. I think that will look a little more, make a little more sense as I walk around. So STP is this triangle here in yellow. The other triangle you can see over here, I'll do that in pink, is this triangle, okay, created with the letters S, K, and P. All right, so using the same path process we used above, go ahead and try to write a congruency statement, pause the video, and check your work. All right, so you should have gotten that triangle STP is congruent to triangle PKS. If you didn't get that, will you please raise your hand and we will be glad to check it out, see what happened. Oh, I'm losing my space here again. Let's go down. All right, so here's another example to walk through. We've been given 2 triangles. It says, given specific info about the angles and the sides of congruent triangles, find the other measure. Given this congruency statement. Here are 2 triangles. They've given us a little bit of information. We know the value of angle J is 85, the value of angle K in this triangle is 32, and the value of JT is worth 6 centimeters. So just based on the congruency statement, I'm going to make I'm going to write some information into these 2 triangles. I can see that M and J are the first 2 letters in my congruency statement, so they will be the same value. Since J is worth 85, I'm going to go ahead and write an 85 in here for M. In addition, they gave us the fact that K is worth 32. In my congruency statement, I see that K and E are in the same position, so I can go ahead and write a 32 in for E. Now, you can see we have 2 angles in a triangle. At this point, a good idea, as I always say, is to find that 3rd angle. It's probably going to be important to you. I like to fill in all my blanks in advance before I even start trying to figure out what some of the measures are. And when I do 180 minus 32, I come up with the value of 63 degrees, which is going to be the 3rd angle here, which is L. And again, L and T are corresponding, so T will also be worth 63. Now, the only measure they gave us for side length was the measure for JT, which was 6 centimeters. You can see here that J is in the front and T is in the back. So the corresponding side will be the 2 letters in the front and the back of this triangle, which are M and L. So I can automatically put 6 here. I'll put 6 centimeters to be precise, next to that side's ML. Okay, now to go through some of this, and I'll have you guys finish out some of it on your own. Angle L is congruent to what? Well, when they have an angle L and a congruency statement, we're talking about what the actual letter is that's creating whatever angle is corresponding to angle L. In our statement, you see that L is in the back and T is in the back. So the proper answer here would be that angle L is congruent to angle T. Similarly, this is showing us a segment called MK, or a side of our triangle. We're talking about what 2 letters are going to create the segment that are congruent. All right, this on the other hand, ML is talking about the actual length of a side. Remember when I say find ML, I'm talking about find the distance from point to point. We know that to be 6 centimeters based on putting that information in over here. So I'm going to write that one in for you. All right, so now based on the information you see in our triangle, go ahead and fill in the rest of these 4 blanks on your own. And so pause the video and do that, and then check your work. All right, and you should have gotten those values. If you didn't, go ahead and raise your hand and we'll give you some help. If you are okay, go ahead and move on to the following page. And you will see, let me go back one. You will see a few triangles, and oh yeah, here we go. We definitely are going to be doing some algebraic expressions based on congruency statements. We've got the given triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF, and we're looking to find the values of x and y. So similar to the last example, I'm going to fill in some blanks based on what I know. I've got this congruency statement that tells me that angle A is congruent to angle D, angle B is congruent to angle E, and I also know that angle C is congruent to angle F, because that's the order in which those angles occur. So I can fill in some information on my triangle over here. Looks like A and D are located here and here. They are corresponding, they are congruent, so we've got a method to come up with the value of x. And so we'll hold off on that for a second. Let's look at B and E, they're congruent, so if E is 42, then I know B is 42. I also know that C and F are congruent. C is 3y, I'm going to go ahead and write 3y in here for F. I don't know how helpful that's going to be as I roll through this, but we'll see how that goes. All right, so let's start with finding x. And to find x, I know that A is congruent to angle D. I'm going to write through this a second just to show those two marks. So I can set that up as such. 87 will be equal to 5x plus 2. And when I walk through this math, I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides and get 85 is equal to 5x. Divide both sides by 5, and x is equal to 17. And now when I'm looking for y, make sure you have all that written down. When I'm looking for y, I have some information inside triangle ABC. I can see that 3y is located in C, I have 42 in B and 87 in A, and instead of using congruent triangles in order to set two things equal to each other in two triangles, here I need to go back to my happy triangle sum theorem. So I'm going to take the values of those three angles and set it equal to 180 degrees. When I combine like terms, I get 129 plus 3y is equal to 180. Subtract 129 from both sides. I get 3y is equal to 51. Divide both sides by 3. And y is also 17. Alright, so make sure you have all that written down. And then you will see underneath a you try using the same type of process. Go ahead and pause the video, and we're looking for the values of A and B based on the congruency statement, and then check your work. All right, and you should have gotten that A is equal to 9 and B is equal to 8.